The talk we put together for you tonight is Alien Abductions, the Untold Truth. Myself, Joe Jordan from CE4 Research Group, Guy Malone from Alien Resistance out of Roswell. Whenever I do this talk, I must give a warning. The following information may change your preconceived notions of the alien abduction experience. A lot of you have watched a lot of shows on alien abductions. You've read books on alien abductions. What we hope to show you tonight is information you probably have never seen. We've been trying to get this information out here for some years. We have a total combined research between the three of us of about 50 years. We worked with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cases dealing with alien abduction. And what we want to do is bring those findings to you here tonight. So stay open to what we have to say. It will be challenging. You will have questions. We want to save the questions to the end. We're going to put this together in about 2 hours, 2 of us speaking. This will definitely raise more questions than we can answer in our 2-hour talk. But we will be open for questions here at the end for about 30 minutes, and we'll go from there. So as you go through this tonight, think about what you want to ask us at the end and save it for then. Thank you. Alien abduction. This is taken from Wikipedia, the free encyclopedia. The terms alien abduction or the abduction phenomenon describe subjectively real memories of being taken secretly and or against one's will by apparently non-human entities and subjected to complex physical and psychological procedures. There's been a lot of movies that have come out over the past few months that have really been pushing this whole idea of UFOs and alien abductions. Most recent one from this past weekend, The Fourth Kind. Any of you guys had a chance to see it? A little disturbing, isn't it? Another one is the series V. This V series was a TV show that was run probably 15 years ago, 10, 15 years ago. They've brought it back, and if you've had a chance to see the first couple of shows, you'll see it's really stepping out there compared to the first series. This is also taken from V. This is what they offer on V, the entities that are on the show. Technology that will help enrich your lives in all areas. This is what these beings have been offering on the show. Another one was District 9. That one came out prior to these last two that have just come out. District 9, that was quite bizarre in itself. I'd like to share with you tonight an example of alien abduction. I have a video that's about 8 minutes long that are going to show up on these monitors. It's going to give you an example of what people go through with alien abduction. This is an entire family that's gone through this experience. Some of you might recognize this video. This video has been airing for 10 years on the A&E channel. It's a very powerful testimony to what these people go through. And I want to start out with sharing this one with you tonight.
Ordinary, everyday people that this has happened to. And it can happen to anybody. I didn't want to believe that it happened to me, but it did.
Joyce Ahrens and her family believe that what happened to them was not an isolated incident. One highly controversial study conducted by the Roper Poll suggests that hundreds of thousands, even millions of Americans, have memories that indicate that they may have been kidnapped by aliens. Abduction researchers believe these abductions happen generation after generation, as this family from West Plains, Missouri can attest. Their story starts one evening in the fall of 1976, in the presumed safety of their home.
I remember just lying there, trying to relax. I'd opened my eyes, I seen a red light flowing across the ceiling, which it almost looked like the Aurora Borealis.
Dan and Joyce Aarons say the room was dark except for the unusual light, which they describe as about 4 or 5 feet in diameter. They say it hovered over the baby's crib at the foot of their bed where their 1-year-old daughter Heather slept. Dan says that when he tried to get up, he found himself immobilized.
That was the most frightening feeling I guess I've ever had in my whole life, is not being able to move.
I was screaming for him to help me because I couldn't move. And I didn't know that he was paralyzed too. And we both sat up in the bed at the same time. And I said, what the hell was that?
The incident was over in what seemed like an instant. The baby was standing up in her crib looking dazed but unharmed. Dan and Joyce thought they had just shared a scary dream. That is until 1992, 16 years later. Dan, a computer technician, was working at his keyboard when suddenly he was seized by panic.
I immediately thought I was having a heart attack because I started sweating real bad. My ears were ringing. It was a real tight feeling in my head.
Dan was rushed to the emergency room where doctors ran tests and ordered x-rays. When the results were in, they concluded that Dan had suffered an anxiety attack and sent him home. But the symptoms persisted.
To see him like that was devastating. He couldn't leave the house. He was so scared.
After 6 weeks of constant fear, Dan sat down in front of the TV trying to relax. He turned on a movie that happened to be about alien abductions. Dan experienced a sudden revelation.
There was one part in that movie that this little creature or whatever was kind of peeking out from around the door, and it was in the dark and the shadows, you know, and everything. And I immediately my heart started racing, and I just kind of completely went out of it again.
Dan wondered, was his anxiety somehow related to the subject of the movie? He later chanced upon another television show about alien abductions and watched an interview with therapist John Carpenter, the National Director of Abduction Research for the Mutual UFO Network. Dan immediately contacted Carpenter for help.
He suffered from a panic disorder at that point in time, and he had flashbacks and nightmarish images of these beings, but didn't understand what was going on and needed some relief.
Dan agreed to an on-camera hypnosis session with Carpenter, during which he revisited that memorable night in 1976, the night he saw the red light over the baby's crib. This time, under hypnosis, he remembers more. He recalls cowering in the corner of his bed as he watched alien beings take his daughter Heather from her crib.
Went to the crib.
He went to the crib.
Picked her up.
Uh-huh.
I can't move.
You can't move. You don't have any control over what's happening to you.
No.
What do you see happening now?
They took her.
He took her.
Under separate hypnosis, Dan's wife Joyce recalled the same sequence of events. They both say little beings marched them outside, and together the family was floated onto a spaceship.
I never wanted it to happen to my children. I didn't realize until later that it had. But when they took her, I couldn't do anything.
Heather, now 22 and married, remembers a series of abductions beginning in childhood, when she was forced to play telepathic games with the aliens.
How do you play the game?
If I pick up that one, he'll let me go.
What are you feeling?
I want to go home.
Mm-hmm. What does he tell you about that?
If I pick it up, he'll let me go.
The Aarons family believes alien kidnappers have not only intruded in the lives of their children, but are now visiting one of their grandchildren.
He calls them his little buddies that come in his room and play. He said he wanted to watch the ship leave. I'm not going to tell him that it's not real, because it is real.
Skeptics would say that Dan, Joyce, and Heather could have constructed their stories together before hypnosis.
But then they'd have to know how to answer the trick questions and the leading suggestions, which I provide. Plus, there are many details they wouldn't know about that we would be looking for as markers for truthfulness and reliability with other abduction data.
Researchers also believe abductees are sincere because of another consistently reported feature of abduction accounts: the insertion of alien implants.
I turned my head to the right, and this taller being came over. And he kept telling me that it would be okay, that they wouldn't hurt me. And then they took this very long needle, and they put it up my right nostril. And I closed my eyes when I heard it crunch. And then I became very calm.
Objects said to be these implants have been recovered. MIT's David Pritchard has examined the composition of one of these reported implants in a laboratory and contends there is absolutely no physical proof of alien activity.
If we don't find physical evidence, and we haven't, then we have to lump this in the category of fairies, elves, near-death experiences people report, or we're going to be back to the days of the medicine men running our society.
With the help of hypnosis, Dan's anxiety subsided and he returned to work. But what once seemed out of this world has now become a part of his life.
If this is some sort of mental thing that's happening to people, then why aren't they out? Why aren't the scientists or the doctors or whatever trying to find a cure?
A little scary, isn't it? First question some of you might ask, does this really happen to these people? It's not as important that you believe that it happened to these people as it is they believe it's happened to them. We're going to cover a number of topics here tonight. Some questions are going to come up that we hope we can address. Is the abduction experience even real? Why do certain people have this experience and not others? Can the experiences even be stopped? These people's lives are traumatized. They're turned upside down. A lot of families are pulled apart because of one person that's had these experiences trying to share the experience with a spouse or other family members. This is not a good thing that happens to these people. First topic we'd like to get into tonight is looking at what the other professional secular researchers in this field have to say about this experience, so that you're not seeing this as something that it's just us saying up here tonight. We want you to see what these other professional researchers are saying, like John Carpenter himself. There's a number of top researchers out there that are looking at this phenomenon and have been for years. And we've been looking at it along with them. Also, another thing we'd like to look at is there communication coming from these entities to these people? There seems to be, and we'd like to take a look at what those messages are coming. And I'd like to bring up Guy Malone from Roswell, New Mexico. He's going to cover those topics. I'd like to introduce Guy Malone from Roswell, New Mexico. Guy is not originally from Roswell, New Mexico. He's originally from Nashville. And as he got into looking at this phenomenon, he wanted to take his research and put up base in Roswell, which, if you guys don't know, every July 4th in Roswell, New Mexico, they have the Roswell UFO Festival. And usually with a number of conferences or one big conference, this happens every year. because that's the anniversary of the crash of 1947, the so-called UFO crash of 1947 in Roswell, New Mexico. Guy has been there for the past 10 years. He's actually been a promoter for a number of conferences there. Guy was actually the director for the city of Roswell for the 60th anniversary conference in 2007. Guy brought 30 speakers to those stages down there for that one particular conference. It was huge. We had people come in from all over the world for that 60th anniversary conference. So he's got some background in doing promoting, helped put this one together tonight. And he's also a researcher, alien abduction researcher, UFO researcher, and I'll let you take over.
Right on. Thanks a lot, Joe, for the introduction and for sharing that opening video. It was quite powerful. And I'll tell you, after I'm done, you're in for a real treat and some shocking information when Joe takes over shortly. I've lived in Roswell, New Mexico, the so-called UFO capital of the world, for the last 10 years now. I'm there as a missionary of sorts. I'm originally from Harvest Christian Fellowship in Nashville, Tennessee, and I got into this field after the mass suicide of a group known as Heaven's Gate. And I'm pretty sure no popular UFO or alien abduction researcher that you might have ever heard of would take the claims of this group very seriously, and all the other sources I'm going to give you tonight will definitely seem a bit more credible to you. But this is the event that kind of defined my calling and my life's work and eventually led to my move to Roswell, New Mexico with the blessing of Harvest Christian. And you might remember from the old news reports that the group's two leaders convinced 39 people to commit suicide in order, they said, to allow all of their souls to board a UFO, which they believed was hiding behind the comet Hale-Bopp as it was passing the Earth in March 1997. And this is the image from Heaven's Gate's website, which is still operational today. And at the very bottom, if you can't read it, it says, "The keys to Heaven's Gate are here again in Tai and Do, the UFO-2," it says, "as they were, the keys, were in Jesus and his Father 2,000 years ago." This next slide originated from the New York Times Company, and I found it on Rick Ross's website about destructive groups, cults, movements, and even abusive relationships and attitudes. It says that the materials the group published claimed in the early 1970s, two members of the Kingdom of Heaven, or what some might call two aliens from space, and I did not add that parenthetical, incarnated in two unsuspecting humans in Houston. The internet text continues, "They consciously recognized that they were sent from space to do a task that had something to do with the Bible." Now, the idea that people would do this based on something aliens told their group leaders about the Bible and the end times was quite shocking to me. So my first book from later in 1997 was my earliest attempt to begin to set the record straight on what the Bible might or might not have to say about entertaining otherworldly entities. I'll give you some info on how you can read that book for free online later if you'd like to, by the way. So while this Heaven's Gate group, they wouldn't seem like most of us to be the most credible of account of alien communication with humans. It's just what got me originally started researching this and taking it seriously. What I've found in the recent years since then, especially since moving to Roswell, is that there is indeed much credible documentation from sources that might genuinely surprise you on this phenomena of alleged aliens, anyways, communicating with humans. And that's what I'm going to be sharing with you just in brief tonight, an overview of the spiritual messages of extraterrestrials. The last full lecture I gave in Roswell during our annual festival this summer was a full 1-hour presentation on the documented messages that people claim the ETs have brought them. And if that statement raises some skepticism with you, well, I'm glad if it does, because it should. It seems to reason, to me anyway, that if in fact aliens do exist, and if they are in fact traveling here to Earth, and if they don't have hostile intent, but they're here to help us or be our buddies, and if they are in fact communicating with humans, that's a lot, I realize, but if all that's true, it seems to me that their messages would reasonably just be largely about science and physics, or the nature of matter, the universe, all the technology that they've discovered over their thousands of years of enjoying superior technology to us. But you'd think if they were actually going to speak to us, that they'd talk largely about the how-tos of star travel, how they got here or how we could get there maybe. But it's going to really surprise you to find out here in a sec that in all the many books written by alien contactees and professional researchers of the phenomena, that the very large majority of these documented messages by these visitors or abductors, if you like, it's almost exclusively about spirituality and the end times, to use the biblical parlance, or the coming earth changes, if you've got a more New Age cosmology. The aliens also have a lot to say about their involvement with humanity now and leading up to this period, the end times, and even how they can save us from the end times if you align yourselves with them. So for credibility's sake, I'm going to share with you in advance the sources that I'm going to be drawing from just for the short presentation. That's my book cover. One researcher I'm quoting is Pulitzer Prize-winning author Dr. John Mack, who up until his death served as the head of the psychiatry department at the Harvard University School of Medicine. The book Abduction is his decade-long study of over 200 men and women who claimed alien abduction. And in 1992, Dr. Mack co-chaired a 4-day conference held at MIT where many mental health professionals attempted to determine if the alien abduction reports could be traced to a psychological malady. This here is the book that resulted from that conference. Alien Discussions, Proceedings of the Abduction Study Conference held at MIT in Cambridge, Massachusetts. You can see it's quite huge. It's chock full of abductee stories and psychological papers presented by the invited professionals. This is the Massachusetts Institute of Technology has taken this topic seriously enough to host a conference by top psychological professionals on the field. And it turns out that the group determined that the alien abduction reports could not be blamed on mental health issues. They wanted to see if it was a sickness and if they could cure it. There's nothing they could find in the entire field of psychology ever documented that would explain what these people is reporting that was a sickness that they could cure or help with. But another well-known researcher in the field is Dr. Carla Turner, PhD. She's also now deceased, and she was herself an abductee, and she also interviewed and counseled many others in the field. Her books are Taken, Into the Fringe, and Masquerade of Angels. They largely contain interviews with other alien abductees, and she lectured very widely at Mutual UFO Network events and other UFO conferences. You could say that she did not have the warm, fuzzy, New Agey, feel-good view of the alien abduction phenomena, but she considered it an invasion and a violation, similar to Dr. David Jacobs, PhD, who's currently the Associate Professor of History at Temple University. And Dr. Jacobs actually obtained his PhD in 1973 based on his research on the UFO phenomena. He's author of The Threat, Revealing the Secret of the Alien Agenda. And he's written many books while studying UFOs and abduction reports for over 40 years. And while I think many of you are going to find it at first hard to believe that there's actually that much information out there on extraterrestrial encounters with humans, I'm going to give you a few quotes also from, believe it or not, the Encyclopedia of Extraterrestrial Encounters, compiled by Dr. Ron D. Story. I mean, who knew there'd be enough of this going on for there actually to be an actual encyclopedia? I got it with me here too also. It's also quite large. It's a great resource. It's full of papers and summaries from dozens of the world's leading experts on UFO and abduction encounters. But it used to be, I know, especially decades ago, that people relegated these tales of alien visits to the campy B-movie stuff of the 1950s. But I'm going to say it's probably since Steven Spielberg's movie, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, that I think many people have begun to take the topic with a little more seriousness, if even only privately. You don't talk about it at work that often. But the polls that have been done today since the 90s, one was mentioned on that video Joe showed, by the Roper organization, Gallup, CNN, USA Today, have all consistently revealed that perhaps 2% of the United States has had experiences like in the movie Close Encounters. So if you know 50 people in your family, your friends, who you work with, chances are that at least one of those people that you know has had encounters of this nature that they remember. Just given that we're all here at an alien abduction conference discussing this stuff, that percentage is definitely going to be much higher, I'm sure. And I know the few of the people in the room as well, and I count myself among that number, by the way. But the debut of that movie this weekend, The Fourth Kind, it's just more evidence that many people are believing in alien abduction. And that movie, I think, is very likely going to push a lot of skeptics toward belief in alien abduction. It's very intense, as a couple of you have already seen it. It's quite disturbing. I honestly can't even recommend that you go see it, in fact, especially if you're dealing with or struggling with this issue. And I especially wouldn't recommend that anyone ever take children to see the movie. But I gave you these sources up front, just first to hopefully make a brief case that there's really quite a bit of credible material worthy of giving some bit of consideration on our part, just to draw from. So the first actual quote I'm going to share to set up the next few minutes is not from an extraterrestrial, not from an alien abductee either. It's from a very famous scientist whom I think we've all heard of, Dr. Carl Sagan. I'll be quoting him from the book authored by Raymond Fowler, but in the annals of abduction reports and contactee cases that have been authored since the 60s, these are the three cases that I think would be considered most famous and most recognizable. Yeah, I see a few heads nodding already. Okay, if you ever looked into the abduction stuff for even 5 minutes, I won't go into detail, but the most well-documented and pretty well-scrutinized cases of alien abduction and visitations happened in the lives of Betty and Barney Hill, Whitley Strieber, I always mess that up, and Betty Andreasson. And the book I'm going to be quoting from is about the third there, Betty Andreasson. The book is by Raymond Fowler, who was her therapist while she was remembering, and with him documenting the many visitations she experienced over the years. The book I'm quoting from is The Andreasson Affair. Dr. Carl Sagan, our nation's leading authority on the question of extraterrestrial life, sought to find a rationale for the reason that might lie behind such visitations in his excellent book, Intelligent Life in the Universe. After critically analyzing a number of possible motives, he stated quite bluntly, one of the primary motivations for the exploration of the New World was to convert the inhabitants to Christianity. Can we exclude the possibility of an extraterrestrial evangelism? Dr. Sagan here, I think he raises a very astute question, and the more that researchers and authors out there study the reports of alien abductions and encounters, this question and the argument for an affirmative answer to the question comes up more and more. Are extraterrestrials intentionally evangelizing us to an alternative spirituality? I'm going to finish this presentation for you with some direct quotes from Betty Andreasson later, describing what happened to her when the entities first came to her. But just over this next 10 minutes, that's all I'm going to take now. I'm going to list some of the alien quotes and expert opinions on their messages and ask you just to draw your own conclusions. And perhaps I want you to try to answer Dr. Sagan's question for yourself. And arguably very credible sources that I've already disclosed to you is all I'm going to use, and they'll give you an overview of what contactees and abductees report they've been told during the encounters, sometimes in broad daylight, sometimes on what seemed like spaceships or in their own bedrooms. The experiences differ in many ways, and many have a hard time pinning them down in space and time when they're describing them. They describe the experiences as having an other dimensional or astral or dreamlike quality to them, and it sometimes takes years to even remember the events I'm going to share with you in detail. And my wife's paper on this topic compares the abduction experiences and the powers of the aliens to biblical visions and experiences in the Bible involving angels. And if you follow that reasoning, combined with the horrific nature of the abduction reports, it raises the question easily of whether some of these people might be dealing with fallen angels. And you can read that paper online on the internet for free as well. So starting with John Mack, finally starting, I say, of Harvard University, after interviewing over 200 abductees and hearing their experiences with aliens firsthand, he writes, the information that abductees receive is concerned primarily with the fate of the Earth in the wake of human destructiveness. Scenes are shown of the planet wasted by nuclear war, and especially of the Earth's environment devastated by pollution and toxic clouds. A number of abductees have been shown apocalyptic images of the Earth itself literally cracked open or broken up, followed by elaborate triage scenes in which some people will die, others will survive in some way on Earth, and still others will be transported to some other place where human life will continue in a new way. of the earth devastated by a nuclear holocaust, vast panoramas of lifeless, polluted landscapes and waters, apocalyptic images of giant earthquakes, firestorms, floods, and even fractures of the planet itself are shown by the aliens. These are powerfully disturbing to the abductees, he writes, who tend to experience them as literally predictive of the future of the planet. Some abductees are given assignments in this future holocaust, feed the survivors, or are told, as in the prophetic books of the Bible, that some will perish while others will be taken to another place to participate in the evolution of life in the universe. It's a very poor interpretation of biblical prophecy on Dr. Mack's part. I'm going to throw in for free, but there's further research by Dr. Carla Turner backs up the idea presented here from Dr. Mack that aliens are allegedly prepping people for the end time scenarios. Here's just a few excerpts from abductees she's worked with and what the aliens told them about their nature and their mission. Pat, the gaze of the gray seemed to penetrate her entire being, and she sensed a familiarity with him. Do not be afraid, it communicated to Pat. You are the chosen child. We will not harm you. A taller white came over with a file-type instrument and scraped skin from her inner forearm and the bottoms of her feet, clipped some of her hair, and then peeled away samples of her fingernails. What do you need all those pieces of me for? She asked. We are making a new you, the entity replied. Are you an angel? Pat inquired. Yes, the entity told her, but not like you have been taught. Did they tell you what's going to happen? Yes, they did. They told me about the bad time on Earth. Carla Turner writes, this image reinforces Pat's altered understanding of God and a spiritual plan. Overall, her experiences with the alien entities have, to the best of her conscious recollection, felt very positive. With a strong religious faith, she has accepted them as angels. Even so, Pat conceded, there are things which the beings do that seem wrong to us and seem violent. Polly, I've been involved with the UFO phenomena apparently all my life, and my children also are or have been involved. My father has had experience. He's very careful who he talks to, as he's still a respected technical person active in a military organization. She explained, it was like I was awakened to a sense of cosmic destiny and to an apocalyptic sort of sense of human destiny, a cosmic mission. I must understand the universe. It became a constant undercurrent of striving which persists even now. Given the reports of other abductees, some of which will be presented later, Dr. Carlos says, it was interesting that she related this job and task on Earth that the aliens are prepping her for to Armageddon. Beth, she could not see what he did, but she felt as if her head was being opened and her brain removed, all without any sensation of pain. When the procedure was finished, the alien stood in front of her, and Beth realized that mentally she was different. Her thoughts and reactions to everything were changed, it seemed, and she was filled with new ideas about God and the unity of all life within that supreme source. Changing sources here to the Encyclopedia of Extraterrestrial Encounters, page 1. Another goal of this alien program is the alteration of human consciousness to change our perceptions of ourselves as a species. However the story emerges, the accounts seem remarkably alike of all alien abduction that's studied. Capture, examination. Number 3 is a conference. A meeting, lecture, or schooling session follows. Tour of the worldly journey, theophany. The witness meets a divine being or has a religious experience. Return aftermath. In the opinion of the writer, the asinine, bizarre, and crazy aspects of the UFO alien activity can be hypothesized as the ABCs of a cosmic consciousness conditioning program to change humans from planetary persons to cosmic citizens. Same author, more detail. Coming up, some might even say a New Age author, describing that the alien contact involves a, quote, theophany, a religious experience with a divine, at least in his opinion, a divine being that conditions them into becoming something else. His more detailed summary of the experiences are UFO contactees have been chosen. No UFO contact is accidental. More importantly, number 4, UFO experiences include paraphysical, parapsychological, and spiritual manifestations which are designed to influence the worldview of contactees. Contactees are programmed for a variety of future activities. They come away from the experiences having a greater sense of cosmic citizenship with other beings in the universe. Number 10, the personal metamorphosis of UFO contactees is the forerunner of a social transformation in human consciousness designed to lead us all into the new age of true science and spirituality. One more from Carla Turner, then I'm going to wind this down and bring it home. Angie asks, am I part alien? One of the Greys told her that she had been altered a little to fulfill a special purpose. And then she asked, did you create humans too? Angie asked, and he confirmed this. For this brief presentation tonight, I just have to be selective in what I can share, but let me tell you, this account is far from the only claim by extraterrestrials that they created human life on Earth. The lecture I presented in Roswell, E.T.'s Message to Humanity, A False Gospel, details this part of it out much more. I'm asking you, are extraterrestrials, based on what you've heard tonight, intentionally evangelizing us to an alternate spirituality? I think I've made the case that they do indeed have a spiritual agenda, and what I've shared with you is not particularly selective on my part. It's not like I'm trying to give you a skewed or a focused view of just one particular portion of alien messages. What I'm sharing is actually quite representative of the whole of alien research, and I'm very confident that any real professional investigator in this field would back me up on that claim. One more I found interesting right before I close, though. Anne Brooke experienced some strange events for which many long years caused her much distress. She is a bright, attractive, perceptive person. However, she was raised in a family that valued family unity, nationalism, traditional views of common sense, and Christian fundamentalist beliefs. She was unable to talk with her family about her UFO experience, which included out-of-body experience, near-death experience, abduction, bodily and sexual examination, and mental communication with UFO entities. Anne Brooke described the effects of her UFO experience as follows. After my experience, I knew that I had been privileged with a glimpse at something infinitely wondrous and profound. It's quite sad, but honestly it's typical as well in true Patty Hearst Stockholm Syndrome fashion. This woman who experienced tortures, including sexual manipulation, winds up identifying with her captors by the time it's over and saying that she had been, quote, privileged to take part in the experience. And just like Patty Hearst, winds up promoting their agenda and their message. It's like an earlier slide I showed you that says this is common of the experience. Contactees are programmed for a variety of future activities and a desire to share their messages. Anne ends this account by saying, those truths I had been taught through the years by my church, family, parents, and teachers no longer were valid to me as a result of her experiences with alien abduction and contact. She's not atypical in this either. After much study of the contactees and abductions, the expert opinion of Christian authors who have looked into this heavily, more so than I have even, on the contactee and abductee experience is that an examination of the evidence indicates that beyond any doubt, a primary agenda of the alien visitors is to change what human beings think about God and His Word, the Bible, and to replace exclusive Christianity with a religion of universalism. Other Christian authors examine the ET movement and they just write point blank, if the alleged messages that contactees are receiving are true, then the Bible is not true. God is not what or who we think He is. Christianity must be radically altered to fit the new paradigm. Don't be fooled. Experiences with these entities or a heavy belief in this phenomena is indeed going to require a choice on your part. Either the aliens are right and they're telling people the truth, which means that everything that the Christian church traditionally teaches about God and the Bible is a lie, or the Bible is right, God is true, and the aliens are lying. I've found that over the years the question of whether God could have created life on other planets, it's not the question that needs to be asked right now. The real question is, are the entities that people are reporting communication with and torment at the hands in this modern era are they authentic extraterrestrials or not? But there's absolutely, I'm just finished by telling you, there's no two ways about it. Allegiance to these entities will cost you your relationship with the real Jesus Christ and the God of the Bible, or vice versa. You will have to make a choice. Being from Roswell, people do often ask me about my other views. Well, what do you think of the 1947 Roswell crash? That's not my topic tonight, but I will say I don't buy the alien crash theory, but I don't buy the weather balloon theory either. If you simply Google Roswell UFO crash, I'm honored to say my writing has been the #1 match for years now. The question I'm going to leave you with is what I want you to ponder, whether these are honest extraterrestrial life forms that have saturated Hollywood and the media in some of our lives or not. Is it possible that they're not only evangelizing us to an alternate spirituality, but are they themselves spiritual beings? The Bible teaches that our true struggle in this life and in this age is not against flesh and blood, human or alien, I'd argue, and that Jesus Christ gives his followers power and authority over wicked spiritual entities. What that means, and many here can testify, I'm sure, if a fallen angel or devil of some kind attacks you, if you're a born-again Christian empowered by the Spirit of God, then you have the authority in you to command that evil spiritual entity to leave. And again, I don't know who's a visitor in here and who's not, but I know good and well in an AG church, I don't have to teach that as if it's new material to you. And I can't think of a better way to introduce Joe than with the final quote from Betty Andreasen's own encounters in her own words. Outside the changing room, the entities awaited Betty. She became fearful and prayed frantically for help. Ah, she thought to herself, what is all this about? What are they going to do to me? Oh, Jesus, be with me. When I said that, the leader glanced at me quickly, sort of surprised or stunned. I guess he was reading my thoughts, but he seemed to move a little slower. He was wondering what all this was about, because he said, you'll be all right. Follow us, please. Getting back at me again. I'm just going to pose the question. If what people are dealing with in these encounters are authentic extraterrestrial life forms with superior technology, why would her almost absent-minded expression of the name of Jesus cause the entities to, quote, be surprised or stunned? This begins to lend itself to a spiritual explanation of the phenomena. I'd say, why else would they suddenly, quote, move a little slower? Because the most common accounts of alien abduction involve people who, by all counts, they're taken against their will. They can't move. They can't even scream often. They can't get away no matter how hard they try, right? You're familiar with it by now. Why would such allegedly superior entities, in the transcribed accounts of one of the most famous abductees in history, as soon as she said Jesus, why would they now have to plead with her and say, please, follow us? Please welcome up my friend Joe Jordan.
Hearing some interesting things, a little different than what you've heard on TV and the movies. Question bears here. Guys brought up some good points, some interesting views. But can it be backed up? Can it be backed up with research and evidence? That's the question. I started into UFO research in 1992. One book got me started. UFO Crash at Roswell. I picked it up on the way to Alaska on a vacation trip. That book caught my attention. It got me hooked onto the subject to learn more and more about it. Within 6 months of reading that book, I came in contact with some people in Orlando that were part of the Mutual UFO Network, MUFON. MUFON is the largest grassroots scientific-based organization doing UFO investigations in the world today. There have been others through the past decades that are no longer with us. NICAP was one that you'll hear sometimes in the movies and the shows. APRO was another one. But MUFON has survived. They've got about 5,000 to 6,000 members worldwide that are field investigators, researchers, consultants that are available to help us groundwork field investigators get the information we need doing sighting reports. I started out doing just sighting reports. Sighting reports happen when somebody sees something unusual that they would classify as unidentified in the sky. They'll usually make a call, whether it's Sheriff's Department, Fire Department, or the newspaper, and they want to share that information. Get somebody to take a look at it. Well, MUFON field investigators, like myself, make themselves available to take those calls so that we can follow up on the sighting reports and do an investigation of it, document the testimony of the eyewitnesses, and it goes to a database with the Mutual UFO Network that they've been compiling since 1969. In other words, here it is 40 years later, and they still don't have answers to this phenomenon. It's ongoing. People are seeing things. People are reporting things. MUFON and other researchers are documenting them. They still don't have answers of what we're dealing with, but they continue to investigate. I became state section director for MUFON for Brevard County after about 6 months becoming an investigator. And a state section director is one who sets up the county-level organization, builds up and trains up other field investigators to work under him so that you got a team that can go out and follow up on UFO sightings investigations. Another requirement as a state section director was you hold monthly meetings for the public. And we used to hold monthly meetings at the Cocoa Library, and they were open to the public. And it was an opportunity to share the work that we were doing as field investigators. And it was also an opportunity for the public to come in and ask questions and share things that they had. Think about it for a second. If you hold an open meeting to the public dealing with UFOs, can you have any idea what kind of people might show up? We didn't. But let me tell you, we heard some stories at these meetings. And first 3 or 4 years into working with MUFON, we pretty much stayed geared to doing the sighting reports and following unidentified objects in the sky sighting reports. But as we had these monthly meetings, we started listening very closely to the people that were coming into these meetings because they had some neat stories to tell. And one of them that caught our attention in particular were the people that claimed that they were having abduction experiences. In other words, they were claiming that they had had contact with the entities that were supposedly powering these UFOs that we were trying to investigate. Well, it doesn't take much logic to figure out we're looking in the wrong place for answers. We're chasing lights in the sky, but we got people right here that are coming to the meetings that are actually having personal contact with these entities that are supposedly piloting these lights in the sky. So I talked to my other researchers working under me, and I said, guys, I think we need to move our focus if we're going to try and find out what the answers are to this phenomenon. I said, these people are front line. These people are in contact with these entities in one way or another, whether they like it or not. But we should be focusing there and not chasing unusual lights in the sky. They agreed. So we changed our focus of research and investigation. We stayed MUFON members. Becoming a member of MUFON and becoming a field investigator is quite interesting because they have quite a setup to train you to do investigations. They have a format that they run you through, that you have steps that you follow to be able to do an investigation, and then steps to follow to document the investigation, because it's the evidence that people want to see. Okay? That's what's going to get the answers, is showing the evidence. So as we started looking into the abduction research, the one thing I noticed talking to the abduction experiencers is they were very traumatized. Their lives were turned upside down. You saw that in the video of that family. They weren't having a good time. Okay? These people come into these meetings realizing that we were MUFON investigators. A lot of times they were coming there looking for help. They thought we had the answers. We didn't have the answers. Abduction research was in its infancy when I started. There were some major researchers that had been working in it for some years, but not very many at the time. The one thing we did not want to do was more harm to these people by working with them, by taking their stories and listening to what they had to say. It's one thing we did not want to do was cause more problems. So we figured we better educate ourselves to the best of our ability in the abduction experience. So we took all the books, all the videos, conference lectures, tapes that we could get our hands on of the leading researchers in the field in alien abduction at the time. And you saw some of those up here in Guy's presentation. We consumed their work so that we could get ourselves to the point that we felt comfortable that we could work with these abduction experiencers and not cause any harm. As we worked with these experiencers and started interviewing them and documenting their case testimonies, we were seeing exactly the same thing that the other researchers are seeing. All of the effects that these people locally that we were talking to, same thing that they were seeing nationwide, if not worldwide, from other experiencers. Same symptoms, same stories, most resembled each other, same stuff you've seen on TV. We were hoping to find something new, but at the time we weren't. We were finding exactly the same thing. Until we came across one special case, and it happened to be a local case. What follows is the case of Bill D. Bill D was an experiencer that came to us. He was coming to my meetings, and he had a story to tell. And one of my investigators and I took the time to go to his home, set up a VHS recorder, and videoed him for 2 hours and get his testimony of what he'd been through down. Bill's experience took place in Christmas, Florida, 1976. His abduction started out typically late at night, in bed. Earlier in the evening, he saw some anomalous lights through his living room window over a forest north of his house. He assumed it was a police helicopter searching for drug runners or something. Whatever it was, it agitated his dogs for several hours thereafter. He eventually went to bed. He was lying in bed, kept wide awake by barking dogs, when paralysis set in. This is something we hear about the experiencers. First sensation they get is they start to feel this paralysis. He was unable to cry out. He could see nothing but a whitish gray, like a mist or fog, although he sensed someone or something was in his room. His wife didn't waken. The next thing he knew, he was being levitated above his bed. Then he had the sensation he was being suspended by what felt like a pole inserted into his rectum. By this time, he was alive with terror, but he couldn't scream. Here is where the story becomes very interesting. The following is an excerpt taken directly from the transcript of Mr. D's interview. I thought I was having a satanic experience, that the devil had gotten a hold of me and had shoved a pole up my rectum and was holding me up in the air. So helpless, I couldn't do anything. I said, Jesus, Jesus, help me, or Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. When I did, there was a feeling or a sound or something that either my words I had thought or the words that I had tried to say or whatever had hurt whatever was holding me up in the air on this pole. And I felt like it was withdrawn, and I fell. I hit the bed because it was like I was thrown back in bed. I really can't tell, but when I did, my wife woke up and asked why I was jumping on the bed. That's an unusual case in a number of ways. This man claimed that he had been able to stop the experience while it was happening. Of all the research we had read, from all the top researchers in the abduction phenomenon research, never had we read where anybody could stop an experience. It wasn't there. So what did we have here? Was this guy off his rocker? Was it remembering properly or what? we were definitely puzzled. Because most of the researchers said that the experience could not be stopped. But yet, I had an experiencer that said it could. It had happened to him. Well, my next thing was to find out more about this experience. I contacted some of the top researchers in this country in abduction research, the ones that had been on the lecture tours, the ones that had written the books, information we had consumed to get us to the point to where we could call ourselves abduction researchers. Called them at home on the phone. I asked these guys, I said, can you help me with a particular case? And they said, sure, we'd love to. Introduced myself, told them a little bit about the case. First thing out of their mouths, can we go off the record? I said, sure we can. Just help me out here. Off the record means I can tell you what they said, but I can't tell you who said it. I do respect anonymity if it's asked. MUFON always respects anonymity, even with experiencers. You come to me, you don't want your story told or you don't want your name given out, we will respect that. These guys shared with me, the ones that I talked to by phone, that they too had come across cases like this. And I said, really? I said, all we hear is you cannot stop this experience. But yet you're telling me you also have come across people who have been able to stop this experience and in that manner? And they said, yes, we have. Well, my next question is how come you don't share this? Why isn't this being shared? If you have documented cases like the one I just came across, why isn't this being shared? One of two answers, or both answers, came out of each of the researchers' mouths that I talked to, off the record. First thing out of their mouth was, we really didn't know what to make of it. I'm fine with that. I didn't know what to make of it. But the problem was when they brought up the second answer. We really didn't want to go there because it might affect our credibility in the realm. You understand what I just said? They have information that we rely on, their research, their sharing of information, for answers. But they're sitting on it. You know, all through this UFO field, you hear about government cover-up this, government cover-up that. What I just found here was we got to cover up amongst the researchers themselves that people are relying on for the truth. And I shared with them, I said, you know, I got nothing to lose here. I'm a new investigator. If you're telling me there's more cases out there like that, I'm going to go find them, and I'm going to document this. This was now going to become my piece of the UFO puzzle. There's a lot of researchers. They each have a piece of the puzzle. We're all trying to bring them together and put them on a table so we can see what the picture looks like. Guy just shared a piece of it with you just a few minutes ago. This was my piece that I was bringing together. I was going to document other cases like this and find out how many there were. How big is this? Okay? And you know what they all said? Please do, because we can't. Over the next 10 years, up till now, I have worked with over 400 abduction experience cases, all matching that first experience. That they've been able to stop the experience by calling out in the name and authority of Jesus Christ. I did not ask to do this research. I did not ask for this piece of the puzzle. This happened to be the one I was dealt. I had no idea it would get this big. I still have cases coming in. We started posting those cases on the internet, just for the evidence. Written testimonies from the people themselves. As more and more and more and more got put on the internet, on our website, more and more people were seeing them. And then the next thing I know, I've got people coming to me and saying, I've been reading those testimonies on your website where people have been able to stop this horrific experience that they're going through. Can you help me stop it? Well, that brings us to a whole nother level. We took the findings from these hundreds of cases, looked at the similarities, looked at how these people's lives were affected and how they were able to stop the experience. And we put it together and said, I think we can help you by sharing what these people have done. There's 3 questions that the top researchers in the world are still asking. Well, 1 question, but there's 3 answers to it. That question is, why does this happen to these people? They still do not have an answer to that question. But in the hundreds of cases that we've worked with, and not just myself, Guy's worked with cases, Pastor Chris Ward's worked with cases. There's more and more and more. Okay? This is where the evidence is coming in. This is where you have to put the documented evidence together to show what you're dealing with. What we found working with these experiencers is a commonality. An answer to that question, why has it happened to certain people? A, you asked for it. You kidding me? People ask for this? You would be amazed. We've stood there in the vendor area with our tables at the Roswell Convention Center in Roswell at the UFO Convention and Conference and Festival, July 4th weekend, and people come up to the table and say, man, I'd really like to have that happen to me. I'm going, please be careful what you ask for. People really want to know what it's about, to the point where they're asking, let it happen to me. Believe it or not, they really do that. B, some people unknowingly open a door to the experience, and the commonality there was involvement in the New Age metaphysical realm or the occult realm. We saw it over and over and over and over and over. When you engage in unknown things outside of God, the creator of His Word, you make yourself vulnerable to these entities. We have the documentation to show this over and over and over. We found this reason to be the most often found root cause. But there was a problem that we still couldn't answer for some people for a while. We finally put it together. We had adults coming to us telling us their stories, and they said, you know, I've had this experience since I was a little child, 4 or 5 years old. Well, how does a 4 or 5-year-old open doors to things that they shouldn't do? You know, they're not dabbling in the occult. They're not dabbling in New Age practices. What we found is you are part of a generational cycle or generational curse. When asked about the experiencer's parents or early family life, we found that the opening had come from one or more of the parents. It is important how you raise your children. When there is a godly covering over the family by the head of the household, the family is protected. But if there is no godly covering, the family is open to these type of supernatural experiences. We found 3 answers that the secular realm still doesn't have an answer for. They don't want these answers. But we have hundreds of cases that show this is why it happens to these people. 1 of 3 ways. Some of them more than 1. Some of them you'll see 2 of them together. Going to the counseling side of this, when people ask us, How do I get set free? Can you help me? I came across this. My wife had read this book and passed it on to me, and she says, you know, I think your research and ministry needs to look at this. I think it would be very helpful. When I read this, it comes from A More Exciting Way, Be in Health by Dr. Henry W. Wright. When I read these 8 R's, I thought, you know, this is amazing, because this is exactly what we were sharing with people, but had never written it down. Number 1, recognize. You must recognize this experience for what it is. 2, responsibility. You must take responsibility for what you recognize. That means you got to do something about it. Repent. Repent to God for participating with what you recognize. Renounce. You must take what you recognize as your enemy and renounce it. Remove it. Get rid of it once and for all. All those little trinkets we pick up over the years and think they're nothing to them in our household, got to go. People that are still dabbling in the occult, the New Age, and still searching all over the internet for answers to this UFO phenomenon, if you want to be set free from this, got to let it go. It leaves an open door for these entities to work in your life. Resist. When it tries to come back, resist it. Why would they put that one in there? Because they do come back. And it takes constant resistance. But these people, hundreds of cases documented, show that there's an authority over these entities when they do mess with you. So much for high technology that Hollywood's been trying to say that's behind all of this. Extraterrestrial high technology, excuse me, doesn't hold a torch at all to the name and authority of Jesus Christ. Imagine that. This is what the research is showing. The secular realm is starting to grasp this. In the 50s and 60s, these entities said they came from Venus and Mars and behind the moon. Guess what? As soon as we started putting ships out there, they backed off. Now they're coming from the stars. Guess what? We got telescopes that can see out to these stars. Now where do they say they're from? Interdimensional. They lie over and over and over. They change their story. It's been progressing over the years. This interdimensional effect that they seem to be showing is being recognized by the top researchers in the world. When I had the opportunity to be in director of the 2008 Roswell UFO Conference, I brought some of the top researchers in the world to that conference. Almost every single one of them had come to the conclusion that this was an interdimensional entity, no longer an EBE, extraterrestrial biological entity. It's taken 40 years for them to get to that point, but they all were backing up what my research is showing before I ever had a chance to talk at that conference. Rejoice. Number 7. Give thanks to God for setting you free. And number 8, restore. Help someone else get free. How do you help someone else get free? Help them recognize. How do you do that? You share your story. This is what we've been doing on the website. This is what we found from the research, that these people were going through these steps to be free from the oppression of these so-called alien entities. Again, I didn't ask for this. I was a UFO investigator. Just all I wanted to be. I got dealt this piece of the puzzle, and I had to run with it. We have the cases documented on the website. I have over 80 documented testimonies of people who can testify that what I'm telling you is the truth. Not only in written form, but now we're recording them in audio form. We have 2 different radio stations that are actually stepped out there and said, you know what? These people need to actually be heard So now we're documenting it in audio form. Over 400 cases we've worked with. I'm still having them come in on a regular basis. How many cases does it take? How many? To get you to understand that there's a problem with this extraterrestrial phenomenon. Tell me 500. I'll bring you 500. Tell me you need 1,000. We're getting there. When I stood up at that conference at the panel discussion last year, one of the researchers said, you know, if only one of his cases is real, we have got to look at this. I got 400 real ones. I got 80 you can read on the website. Little different than what you expected to hear. This is not what Hollywood's given you. This is not what television's given you. We are probably the most hated people in the UFO realm because we're not pushing an agenda. All we're doing is sharing research that goes against their agenda. We're respected, but they don't like us being there. This is evidence you cannot refute, and that's what burns them. It's one thing to stand up here like Guy was talking and say, he's off the wall. He's a fanatic. I'm MUFON. Belong to the largest UFO organization in the world. They know what I'm doing. They know about the research I have. They don't like it either. But they have to deal with it. Because I took their methodology to document it, and they have to respect that. This is what we wanted to bring into you tonight. The most powerful evidence in the UFO community right now. And it ain't going away. It's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. There seems to be a definite spiritual connection to this phenomenon. What is that spiritual connection? Looking at it from it's leading to a Christian perspective. I didn't ask for that. I wasn't a Christian. I was a secular, agnostic UFO researcher that had this dumped in my lap. But we must look at this from the Christian perspective because that seems to be where it's leading. All right. You've heard a lot of information tonight. I told you it would probably bring up a lot of questions. Back to where's the evidence? Okay? That's the one thing I wanted to make sure that you guys got a chance to see. Living evidence. Okay? This is what it all comes down to. Can I back up what I'm showing you guys? Can I back up that these cases exist? Matt's from Orlando, Florida. He's come over here to testify that he can say that the name and authority of Jesus Christ is over these entities and their abilities.
I became a believer in 1989. Had a very, very powerful, almost road to Damascus type experience, alone with the Holy Spirit. At that time, however, unfortunately, I was reading Communion by Whitley Strieber, which is one of the authors they showed up here, and made the incorrect assumption that people like Zechariah Sitchin and Eric von Daniken have made that, the angels in the Old Testament were really aliens. I didn't understand it was just the other side of the coin. It's the real truth. And thank God I met Chris Ward and Joe Jordan. I used to run a small UFO forum as well in Orlando, and I met Joe kind of through that. But I've never had any abduction experiences. I have seen these entities. Sometimes I've even seen them recently. But I have no, I wouldn't say, no, really, I really have no fear of it. Every single time I rebuke it in the name and authority, as Chris Ward said, all authority in heaven and earth has been given to Jesus Christ. And he gives us that authority through the power of his Holy Spirit and our faith. And there's nothing to be concerned about.
Thank you, Matt. Blade. Blade's come down from Gainesville. These are testimonies that you can actually read about and hear their verbal testimonies on the radio shows that we're posting on the internet. All of these ones you'll see tonight, we've pretty much had a chance to get them up there where you can go back and listen to their whole stories. Kathy's come down from Jacksonville. Kathy was one of the first ones I came across that would publicly speak about her experiences. The last time that Chris and Guy and I got together, well, besides this summer, was 10 years ago. And we spoke at a church up in Titusville. And Kathy was the first one to come forward and actually, as a testimony, give her testimony. And she's got an awesome story.
About 10 years ago, I was dropped in my bed. Before that, I had no clue that anything like that had ever happened to me. Didn't expect it to. It was the movies. It was Hollywood. It was fun to look at. But when I opened my eyes, there was a gray alien within inches of my face, and I actually felt his breath on my skin. I turned away to get away from him and fell back to sleep. The next morning, my son opened my eyes by saying, "That wasn't an alien, Mom, it was a demon." I got on the internet, I went to the library, I stumbled across Joe Jordan, who opened my eyes even more and reminded me that I did already have the authority as a born-again Christian to make this go away. About 2 months later, it happened again, and as they approached my bed, I just frankly said no 3 times, claiming the authority of the blood of Christ, and they disappeared into thin air. And now I tell my story because I want people to know if you seek this stuff out, you will find it. It is real, but it's not what Hollywood is telling you it is.
Kathleen? Kathleen's come over from the Ocala area.
Hi, my name is Kathleen, and my master's is in science education. I'm a professional educator in Central Florida. I'm new to this, but everything that has been discussed today I very much resonate with. For the past 8 years of my life, almost on a nightly basis, I have intense dreams. And it started with just faces staring at me, looking at me strangely, almost oddly, that I was able to travel to this realm. And I felt that a full contact would take place, and sure enough it did. And I never heard this story of Betty that was shared today, but her experiences very much resonate with my own. It started with an interview process in which I was to perform certain tasks. And for 3 solid years, it was pretty much anything you would think of that would include, torturous activity, seeing devastating things on earth, having to watch my loved ones die, even having to watch myself die. After this, I was then basically having to give a choice. They offered me gifts of fame, fortune, queendom of their realm, and when I would call upon the name of Jesus Christ, the encounter would stop. And actually, just most recently, about a month ago, was my most intense encounter. I was told that because I was born of a certain age, that I would have to die, and those with me would have to die as well. When I was told that I was to die and just be led off to the slaughter, I knew we could fight these entities. So I would tell others to fight with me, and we would fight by saying certain prayers and calling upon the name of Jesus Christ. And as we would surround them, they would burst into flames. So again, this has been now happening to me for about 8 years, and I have these dreams on a nightly basis, and what has helped me to fight them is calling upon the name of Jesus Christ and saying certain prayers like the Our Father and the Hail Mary and the Apostles' Creed. Thank you for having me.
Guy and Nicole? I don't know if you caught it when Guy was talking, but Guy mentioned that he is an experiencer. Come on over. Get right next to Kathleen. Come on in. Nicole, come on over. Guy actually published his testimony in a book called Come Sail Away, and he showed the book up there. You can get that online. Want to say something?
I've said a lot already. I just wanted to mention, yes, the curiosity, the passion that led me into ever researching this before I moved from Nashville was the revelation that this had all happened to me. And after I became a Christian, I'm like, well, everything I'm reading about deliverance and demonic is exactly what I went through. A guy that witnessed to me suggested to me that the UFO thing might be demonic. I didn't even know the word anointed then, but it was anointed. And it made me realize, have I been in league with these bad guys? And after becoming a Christian, the one thing I was afraid of beforehand that even made me study it was, if this happened to me as a kid, it's going to happen all my life. And it's going to happen to those that I love for the rest of my life, and to any children or wife, everything. And that was what I didn't want. And that's what basically brought me to Christ. And I found out the next time anything came near me, I've had 3 attempts in the last 10 years where I could sense them coming or I could see something going on. And as the others have testified, it's just you take an offensive defense, and in the name and authority of Jesus Christ have been able to stop the experience repeatedly from happening to me again. And that's the hope. That's what Joe's uncovered, and that's the hope we offer.
Joe said I was having abduction experiences up to about 2.5 years ago, and when I got to looking into it, I found the CE4 website and the Alien Resistance website and the Guide to Self-Deliverance on there by Pastor Chris. And it said to rebuke in the name and authority of Jesus Christ, and that's what I did, and the abduction stopped. The next time I felt one coming on, that's exactly what I did. The Lord Jesus Christ rebuke you, and I haven't had an experience since.
But I got a special one I want to bring up. He's not an experiencer in any way. The only thing he experienced was me before I found the truth. And I just want to make sure that you guys have a testimony that can back up and say, nope, he was not a Christian all the time. Nope, he didn't come at this as being a Christian. Nope, he was a bad guy. And John, come on up. John knew me before I ever got into all this stuff. And he can tell, I'll let him talk.
My name is John Black, and I met Joe at Sea Ray Boats. And I came from working in a church in Lawton, Oklahoma, where I was kind of in a shelter, so to speak, with the world. When the first day I walked into Sea Ray Boats, I found out what the world was really like, because it was like stepping from the light into darkness, and I'm serious. It was probably a year before I met Joe, because I was in a different department. Then I got transferred to where he was working. And it was bad enough in the backyard, or Final Finish, where they called it, and with some of the guys that attacked me verbally for what I believed. But I never gave in. And I just told them, I said, you can say what you want, but I'll still pray for you. And it used to get their goat. So I met Joe Jordan, and he found out I was a Christian. And I thought it was bad in Final Finish. No, it wasn't even close. This guy was like the devil incarnate. I mean, he came down on me, ridiculed me, made fun of me, did everything he could to discourage me. But I just tell him, I say, well, you can say what you want, you can believe what you want, but I said, I believe in Jesus Christ, and I said, nothing's going to change that. And about 2 years after I was laid off at Sea Ray, I was at home one night in November, and it was right before Thanksgiving, and I got a phone call. I answered the phone, said, is this the John Black that used to work at Sea Ray? I said, yeah. Because now there's a lot of John Blacks in the phone book. When I moved here, there was about 3 of us. Well, anyway, he said, hey, this is Joe Jordan. I said, oh, yeah? And he says, but not the Joe Jordan you used to know. And I said, well, what do you mean by that? He said, I got saved last week. And I almost couldn't answer for a second, because I thought, God, did you make a mistake? There's no way you could save Joe Jordan. I mean, I still prayed for him, and I still had faith, you know, to me, I put him in my pray for the hopeless case, you know. But when I heard him say that, God reinforced my Christian beliefs, because I saw something happen in him that I'd prayed about and that I'd almost given up hope, and it renewed my faith, and it gave me it just energized me. And I just want to thank God that Joe was brought into my life and I was brought into Joe's life, because now I see a man of God, and I continue to pray for him.
Thank you, John. Last one. You guys remember that video I showed in the beginning? The family that went through all of that trouble? Remember the gal at the end? That was the mom. Why can't they find a cure for this? She's found a cure for this. Hollywood's not going to tell you that part. There's an end to that story, and it's a happy ending. Joyce Aarons, come on up. Joyce is from Missouri. Okay. You want to talk?
You know, I really don't know what to say, because all these people have stood up there and said everything that I feel. My God is an awesome God. He is an awesome God. And I can testify to what all of these people are saying, that I stopped him dead in his tracks. He could never touch me again, ever. He will never have that chance. They tried once, and it didn't work. I've never had them come back at me again. My family are still riding the fence. But I left that up to him, and he'll take care of that. Of that, I have no doubt. It may take a little while, but I can stand here and say that my husband, my daughter, and my son have not had any more experiences since I became a believer and gave it to him. Thank you.
Evidence? This is the most powerful evidence in the UFO community. You won't see this on TV. You won't see it at the conferences. You won't read about it from all the secular researchers. I've got 400 cases, 80 of them that have gone public. I bring you 8 of them right here today. This is really happening. The experience is really happening to these people. But there's a name and authority over that experience. So much for their high technology. It bows to the name and authority of Jesus Christ.